In the darkest corners of a forgotten town, there stood an abandoned hospital. The Willowbrook Hospital, as it was once known, had a history marred by unspeakable horrors. The locals whispered tales of patients gone missing, malevolent spirits, and the incessant screams that echoed through its decaying halls. Many believed it to be cursed, and none dared venture near it, especially after the sun dipped below the horizon. As the years passed, the hospital fell into a state of decay, its once white walls now a sickly shade of gray. Windows were shattered, and weeds choked the courtyard. The only thing that remained intact was the imposing facade, which seemed to leer at anyone who dared approach. One moonless night, a group of thrill-seekers gathered at the outskirts of town. They had heard the stories, seen the videos online, and now they intended to prove their bravery. Sarah, the most fearless of the bunch, led the way. Her jet-black hair and piercing blue eyes belied her fearlessness, or perhaps it was fueled by her desire to confront the unknown. The group, armed with flashlights and cameras, ventured into the eerie hospital. The air inside was thick with a musty odor, and the silence was deafening. Sarah's footsteps echoed through the corridor as she led the way. The hospital seemed to come alive with every step, creaking and moaning as if it had a tortured soul. They reached the heart of the hospital, the operating theater. The room was bathed in a pale, ghostly light that emanated from a broken skylight above. The rusty operating table stood as a chilling reminder of the unspeakable procedures that had once taken place here. As Sarah turned to address her friends, a spine-chilling whisper filled the room. "Leave!" it hissed, a voice that seemed to come from the shadows themselves. The group froze in terror, their flashlights trembling in their hands. Ignoring the warning, Sarah pressed on, determined to capture evidence of the paranormal. She snapped pictures and recorded eerie sounds that seemed to come from all directions. But with each passing moment, the malevolent presence in the hospital grew stronger. The group's descent into darkness had not gone unnoticed. The hospital, it seemed, had a life of its own. Doors slammed shut, trapping them in narrow, suffocating corridors. Blood-curdling screams echoed through the halls, voices of the tormented souls who had met their end here. One by one, Sarah's friends began to vanish, swallowed by the shadows. Panicked and alone, she made her way back to the operating theater, where she saw something that froze her blood. On the operating table lay a spectral figure, shrouded in a tattered hospital gown, its eyes empty voids of despair. The entity stretched its ghostly hand towards Sarah, whispering, "Join us." Before she could react, Sarah felt an icy grip on her wrist, pulling her closer to the operating table. She fought with all her might, but it was futile. She was being claimed by the hospital, becoming one of its tormented souls. And so, the stories of the haunted Willowbrook Hospital continued, with new tales of Sarah and her ill-fated friends joining the chorus of horror that emanated from its decaying walls. The hospital had claimed them, and it hungered for more, a malevolent force that would never be satisfied until it had taken every soul that dared to enter its haunted halls. In a small, forgotten town, nestled deep within a forest shrouded in perpetual mist, there stood an abandoned hospital. The townsfolk dared not speak its name, for it was said to be haunted, plagued by a malevolent presence that had driven even the bravest souls to madness. They called it the Whispering Asylum. Decades ago, the Whispering Asylum had been a place of healing, but it had fallen into darkness. The overgrown vines, like gnarled fingers, clung to the decaying walls. Broken windows gaped like empty eye sockets, and the wind moaned through the cracked foundation as if the building itself mourned its own torment. The tale of the asylum's haunting began with Dr. Elias Blackwood, a brilliant yet unhinged physician. He was obsessed with unlocking the secrets of the human mind and conducted horrific experiments on the asylum's unfortunate patients. It was said that their anguished whispers could still be heard on the darkest of nights. One stormy evening, a group of thrill-seekers from a nearby city ventured into the town, their curiosity outweighing their fear. Among them was Sarah, a fearless investigative journalist, determined to uncover the truth about the asylum's dark past. She brought with her recording equipment and a notebook, ready to document their findings. As the group entered the asylum, they were greeted by an oppressive darkness that seemed to consume their flashlights' feeble beams. The air grew heavy, suffused with a tangible malevolence that weighed upon their souls. The first eerie encounter came in the form of faint whispers echoing from the shadows. Sarah recorded them, though their words were incomprehensible. Unease settled upon the group, but their curiosity pressed them deeper into the asylum's nightmarish heart. They reached the decaying remnants of Dr. Blackwood's laboratory, where grotesque experiments had once taken place. The walls bore stains that refused to be scrubbed away, and an ominous message was scrawled in dried blood. "He watches." As the group continued their exploration, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber in the basement. Inside, they found a labyrinthine network of tunnels filled with forgotten patients' belongings, discarded like remnants of lost souls. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was guiding them deeper into the darkness. That's when the true horror began. They encountered apparitions of the tormented patients, their eyes hollow and their hands outstretched. Blood-curdling screams filled the air as the ghosts reenacted their final moments of agony. As fear threatened to consume them, Sarah realized the only way to escape the asylum's clutches was to confront its malevolent entity. Armed with her recorder, she challenged the entity, demanding answers about Dr. Blackwood's deeds. In the heart of the asylum, the entity finally revealed itself, taking form as a grotesque, shadowy figure. It whispered the tragic tale of Dr. Blackwood's descent into madness and the suffering he had inflicted on the innocent. With great effort, Sarah and her companions managed to escape the whispering asylum, but the horrors they had witnessed haunted their dreams forever. Sarah's expose of the asylum's dark secrets shook the world, and the town was finally freed from its cursed history. But the whispering asylum continued to stand as a stark reminder of the darkness that could consume even the brightest minds, a place where the line between reality and nightmare blurred, and the tortured souls of the past would forever remain imprisoned in its crumbling walls. In the dead of night, an eerie, abandoned hospital stood shrouded in mist on the outskirts of town. The locals knew better than to venture near it, for the legends whispered of ghostly apparitions and tortured souls that roamed its desolate halls. They called it the Haunted Hospital, a name that had been earned through decades of chilling stories. The hospital had once been a place of healing, a beacon of hope for the sick and wounded. But that was a long time ago, before it fell into disrepair and was abandoned to time. It was said that the hospital had been the site of unspeakable experiments, where the boundaries of science and ethics blurred into madness. One stormy night, a group of daring friends, intoxicated by bravado and a dare, decided to explore the haunted hospital. They crept through the broken windows and found themselves in a dark, foreboding corridor. The air was cold, and an unsettling silence hung heavy in the air. As they ventured deeper into the hospital, strange sounds echoed around them, a soft whispering, distant cries, and the creaking of doors that shouldn't have been moving. Each step they took seemed to echo through the silent darkness, as if they were disturbing something long forgotten. The group split up to explore different sections of the hospital. One by one, they encountered terrifying visions. A nurse, her eyes hollow and her uniform stained with blood, wandered the halls, pushing an empty gurney. A child's laughter echoed from a locked room, but there was no child to be found. In the operating theater, they stumbled upon an old surgeon's mask, tainted with dried blood, hanging from a hook. As the night wore on, their sense of dread grew. Shadows seemed to come to life, reaching out to them from corners and doorways. The temperature plummeted, and their breath hung in the air like fog. Their flashlights flickered, casting eerie, shifting shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Then they heard it, a bone-chilling, agonized scream that seemed to emanate from the depths of the hospital. Panic seized them, and they rushed to find each other in the dark labyrinthine corridors. But the hospital seemed to twist and change, leading them in circles. One by one, they disappeared, swallowed by the malevolent force that haunted the hospital. Their terrified cries echoed through the empty halls, but they were never heard from again. The next morning, the locals found the hospital as silent and foreboding as ever. No trace of the daring explorers remained. From that day on, no one dared approach the haunted hospital, for they knew that those who entered its cursed halls would never return. The legends of the haunted hospital endured, and the townspeople told and retold the story, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked in the abandoned building. It stood as a macabre testament to the horrors that had unfolded within its walls, and the souls that would forever be trapped there, condemned to haunt it for eternity. In a desolate corner of an old, decaying city stood the ominous Mercer Hill Hospital. Once a place of healing and hope, it had long since fallen into disrepair and disrepute. Few dared to enter its darkened halls, for it was whispered that the hospital was haunted by tortured souls. Dr. Eleanor Moore, a determined paranormal investigator, had heard the chilling rumors about Mercer Hill Hospital for years. She believed that the key to understanding the supernatural lay within its walls. With a team of fellow investigators, she decided to unlock the hospital's secrets once and for all. As the team entered the abandoned hospital, a cold wind whispered through the broken windows, sending shivers down their spines. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and their flashlights revealed walls covered in peeling paint and faded memories. The hospital's eerie silence was broken only by the occasional creaking of the floors beneath their feet. Dr. Moore led her team deeper into the hospital, guided by old floor plans and whispered legends. It didn't take long for strange things to start happening. Shadows danced in the corners of their vision, and eerie whispers echoed through the empty corridors. The investigators' nerves were on edge, but they pressed on. They reached the basement, the darkest and most foreboding part of the hospital. As they descended the rickety staircase, they could feel a malevolent presence growing stronger. It was as if the very walls were closing in around them. In the dim light of their flashlights, they stumbled upon a room filled with old patient records. Dr. Moore began to sift through them, hoping to find clues to the hospital's dark history. As she read, she uncovered a gruesome tale of medical experiments gone horribly wrong, and the tortured spirits of patients who had suffered at the hands of sadistic doctors. Suddenly, the room grew icy cold, and the investigators heard faint cries of pain and despair. Shadows swirled around them, taking form and shape. Dr. Moore and her team watched in horror as the tormented spirits materialized before them, their hollow eyes filled with anguish. The spirits, driven by anger and vengeance, reached out for the intruders. Dr. Moore and her team fled, their hearts pounding with terror. They raced through the hospital's corridors, but the spirits pursued them relentlessly. Whispering their tales of woe and suffering. As they reached the exit, the doors slammed shut with a deafening crash. Trapped inside Mercer Hill Hospital, the investigators knew they had only one option: to confront the vengeful spirits and lay their souls to rest. With a mixture of fear and determination, Dr. Moore and her team began a harrowing ritual to release the spirits from their torment. It was a battle of wills, a struggle between the living and the dead. The hospital shook with the intensity of their encounter, but in the end, the spirits were vanquished, and the hospital was finally at peace. Dr. Eleanor Moore and her team left Mercer Hill Hospital forever changed by their experience. They had uncovered the dark secrets of the haunted hospital and had freed the tormented souls trapped within its walls. But the memory of that night would haunt them for the rest of their lives, a reminder of the true horrors that can lurk in the shadows of the human soul. In a remote and desolate corner of a small town, there stood an old, abandoned hospital that had long been the subject of chilling tales and ghostly legends. It was known as St. Agnes Hospital, a place with a dark and twisted history. Locals avoided it like the plague, claiming it was cursed, haunted by the tormented souls of patients who had met gruesome fates within its decaying walls. The hospital had been built in the late 1800s, a sprawling complex with towering, Gothic architecture that loomed ominously over the town. For decades, it had served as a place of suffering, a breeding ground for misery and despair. Patients entered its doors with hope, only to leave in body bags or with their sanity forever shattered. One stormy night, a group of thrill-seekers decided to investigate the rumors that surrounded St. Agnes Hospital. Among them were Sarah, a brave young woman with a penchant for the supernatural, and her friends, Mark, Lisa, and Tom. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and their nerves of steel, they ventured into the heart of darkness. As they entered the hospital, a wave of icy air washed over them, and they shivered despite their layers of clothing. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, and the floors creaked under their every step. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows, making it seem as though the walls themselves were breathing. They explored room after room, each one more unsettling than the last. In one, they found rusted surgical instruments, stained with dried blood. In another, they stumbled upon a collection of patient records detailing horrific experiments that had been conducted in the name of medical progress. As they descended deeper into the hospital's bowels, their unease grew. They heard whispers in the shadows, faint cries for help that echoed through the halls. Sarah's camera captured strange orbs of light, and her friends began to feel as though they were being watched. The group reached the basement, a place rumored to be the epicenter of the hospital's malevolence. The air was thick with a putrid stench, and they could barely see through the darkness. Suddenly, Mark's flashlight flickered and died, leaving them in pitch blackness. Panic set in as they fumbled for their own flashlights, but when they finally turned them on, they were met with a horrifying sight. Standing before them were the ghostly apparitions of patients, their faces contorted in agony. One was missing an arm, another had a grotesque surgical scar across its chest. They reached out with rotting, skeletal hands, moaning in anguish. Sarah and her friends screamed and bolted for the exit, racing up the stairs, but the hospital seemed to come alive, its doors slamming shut, trapping them inside. Desperate and terrified, they fled deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, pursued by the relentless spirits. Hours turned into days as they wandered through the haunted hospital, their minds slowly unraveling. They encountered more tormented souls, each one a victim of the hospital's unspeakable horrors. Sarah's camera captured their torment, their hollow eyes staring into the void. In the end, Sarah and her friends were never seen again. The legend of St. Agnes Hospital persisted, warning all who dared to enter its cursed halls. The town remained forever haunted by the chilling screams that echoed from the decaying building, a reminder of the horrors that lurked within its walls.